My name is Edith Chang.
Your profession?
I'm a physician. I am a high risk obstetrician.
My name's Dan Fishbein. I'm a cardiologist. Um, I'm the director of the Heart Transplant and Heart Failure Service at the University of Washington.
Those are my parents, Edith Chang and Daniel Fishbein. Both of them work at the University of Washington and are dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Over the course of my 20 years, 15 of which I remember vividly, I've seen my parents cope with the mental, physical, and emotional toll that being a doctor has prescribed to it. However, through that lens, I have learned more about my parents as people, what they believe, what they care about, what they disagree about, and what motivates them. With COVID 19 being an unprecedented event in human history, I've seen these beliefs challenged, reaffirmed, and contemplated by my parents. From their eyes, this is a David and Goliath, and I wanted to document that story.
The rest of my day was spent calling patients who I was supposed to see, but we converted their clinic visit into a so called telephone visit. Um, I find telephone visits interesting, being brought up, or rather being trained as a clinician. I'm used to having patients in front of me and speaking with them and actually then examining them. That's what I always think a good physician does. They do a careful history and a careful exam. I find that I lose in a telephone visit is that you lose all those visual cues that you've trained yourself to pay attention to. What does the patient look like? Do they look sick? Are they short of breath when talking? Were they walking slowly into clinic? Do they look thin? Do they look fat? Do they have swelling in their legs?
I think my dad speaks from my mom's perspective here. As healthcare workers, they have one of the most intimate relationships with people other than therapists and family members. People are voluntarily coming to them asking for help and solutions. With COVID 19 being a debunking factor, like my dad said, this distance is hard for them because it truly inhibits their primary job, which is to understand their patients. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for social distancing, but I can see from my dad and my mother that they love to get to know people, to create an intimate relationship and share the hardship of trying to help someone heal through a time of pain.
From the medicine point of view, every patient, whether you're Bill Gates or someone who's homeless, deserves 100% of my medical advice and of my medical care. So I would never tailor somebody's care based on who they are.
I think her answer sums up my conclusion that her job should always be unbiased. That as a doctor, your goal is to save human life, and not diminish or classify people as worthy of this kind of care or that kind of care. My mom has always had this belief, and she has taken it into her hands as a chief of medicine to make sure that her unit of obstetrics doesn't complicate their goal of saving lives of both mothers and babies. Particularly in the COVID 19 case, this represents a time when those are reaffirmed. She sees that whether or not you have COVID, they will do the necessary things to make sure you are safe. My mother doesn't really care about COVID 19 in the sense that it might jeopardize her unit, because she knows that if she can bring another life into this world, then she is restoring some idea of life into the world.
Um, it's funny. I generally, when I sleep, when I fall asleep, I stay asleep. And I've been waking up at between 2 and 3 many mornings, which is very unusual for me. Yeah, I think, there's a certain amount of kind of residual worry or I'm not going to call it depression because I don't think it is depression.
Stress.
It's concern, it's stress. So I think that, I think probably many people, not just physicians, feel this way. It's, what's the economy going to be look like? Am I going to get sick?
There are days when I drive back to or from work where there will be moments where I just want to cry. I feel like I am in a nightmare um, because of all of this. Because we have to walk around now thinking that we really need to be in masks all the time in order for the economy and for us to go back to some level of normalcy. But that's never normal.
You know, it's hard to sit behind a camera and listen to both of my parents explain their pains and worries. As their son, I want to go across the camera and hug them, but for the sake of this story, I wanted to stay far apart to try and see what those feelings and emotions would bring out. In my dad's case, I've never seen him cry, and he tends to not share his emotions with anyone. But hearing my dad wake up in the middle of the night, come downstairs, means he hurts. He knows the risks that are involved, and he knows that COVID is hindering him from doing the best job that he can. In my mother's case, I've seen her cry, and I can tell when she has had a bad day. But for my mother, she takes the care of people seriously and sees the faults of others as a fault of her own. My mother is such a strong person that almost everyone that meets her and creates a relationship with her calls on her in their time of need. With COVID, I see that she can't do this on her own, and she isn't, but it shows that the confidence, experience, and level of passion that has always been there is still there. I know that her qualities help to motivate healthcare workers during these uncertain times.
Carlos said to me, he said, you know, Edith, that kid died. And I said, I'm so sorry. I said, he's a 23-year-old. And he said, you know what, Edith? He said, I was the last person that he saw. I was the last person who talked to him. And I will just tell you, so this has been 2 weeks now, and I'll tell you that it's like in the front of my brain. I can't get it out of my head. And like I said, even though I wasn't there, I've been there. I've been there where I've had to intubate somebody. And the idea that Carlos was the last person that this kid saw, like, what was this kid thinking about? You know, I just can't imagine. I just can't imagine how sad it is. And since then, I've had to be in the OR with Carlos a couple of times, and I notice what Carlos says to the patient. He is just so. For one of my patients recently, you know, he put his hand on her shoulder, and he said, "You're going to be okay. I'm going to take care of you. You're going to be fine." And I'm sure that that's what he said to this kid when he was intubating him. And I just can't imagine. I just can't imagine that. And so it's just, I just can't get it out of my brain. I just can't get it out of my brain.
When my mom was a bit younger and in a lower position, she was hard-headed. But to see and hear my mom explain the story showed me that all of the healthcare workers right now can't let go of their emotions and expel them because they have to be strong for the weak. By being strong like my mother and Carlos, they give the weak hope that they too can be strong again. I think my mom understands that watching someone die is something she can never forget. To have a young person die that is the same age as my sister is deeply profound. While it may seem that she is traumatized by that event, I think when she means it is in the front of her brain, it means to her that she needs to work even harder for the people that have lost their lives, so that people around this country can get back to normal and live without worry.
I think that this is something of a natural disaster, meaning that this happened, that the world medically and epidemiologically was set up for this virus. I hope it makes us all realize that we live in one world and that we're responsible for taking care of it.
And you do your best. You never do it perfectly for either side.
There are sacrifices.
You constantly feel guilty that you aren't giving everything that your patient needs from you, but you give enough. And then you're constantly feeling guilty that you aren't there enough for your family.
I think for my parents, COVID-19 represents a time for change and a time for unity. As doctors, they've seen that the profession has united in one common goal, which is to help people. For my mom and dad, they haven't seen anything like this in their lifetime. So it shows them that the way in which doctors value science, climate change, and equity in this country should be felt by everyone across the globe. They're both optimists, and I think they see the good in people because of the work they do. However, for them, COVID represents a true threat to their world. It represents a threat to my sister and I. When my mom talks about the conflict that they have been fighting, she sees that while my sister and I are independent and are adults, she can see that COVID represents a time more than ever when my parents want to be with us. However, if they don't do their part in helping fight this virus, they can't truly be with us.